You're listening to this, or if you're watching this on YouTube, Norman and I have some exciting news that transpired in November. November was a really abundant month for me. Not only did I find my normie pants, not only did I find Norman and I adopted him, but I also made the decision in November, due to some unforeseen circumstances that I'll get into in a second, to move from Manhattan to the south of France at the end of the year. So I have a one-way ticket on New Year's Eve from JFK to Paris and then the south of France. And on New Year's Day, I will be officially living in France. So this is not something that I saw coming, at least not this year. Although, if you know me, you should not be surprised by this at all, because this is something I've been literally talking about forever. So it's surprising that it's happening now, but it's not surprising that it's happening. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I just got my hair cut and blown out, so my hair is looking extra good. And I just got my 1989 sweatshirt in the mail that was like a Spotify exclusive. So I'm looking really good for this video. Just had to put that out there. But nothing that has happened this year has been on my bingo card, to say the least. So to summarize my year in a nutshell, it started off by experiencing very sudden grief and grief for the first time, which spiraled me into a crippling depression, which then spiraled me into an identity crisis, which then forced me into a really intense spiritual awakening healing journey, which then turned my 2-week trip to France during the summertime into a 2-month trip, which then that whole experience forced me to fully surrender and burn everything down to the ground so I could rebuild my life and my business in a very intuitive, intentional way based on my actual desires and not based on fear and ego, which then brings us to today. So, long story short is in September, there was a pipe that burst. I was not one of them. However, my next door neighbor that I share walls with, her apartment completely flooded. So a bunch of people in the building got like eviction notices, basically being like, there's too much water damage. We have to do massive like construction, so you need to get out. And now you're probably thinking like, okay, but like, couldn't they just let you move back in when the job is done? No, they did not. They were like, we literally don't know how long this is going to take. We have to knock down the walls. So you just need to leave and find somewhere else to live, which is very, very New York. So I thought I was in the clear because I never got that notice in September. Well, cue like the week before Thanksgiving, I opened my mail and guess what was in it? The eviction notice. So I spiraled. Let me tell you about the absolute shit show of a spiral I had when I opened that letter, because not only have I had such a intense year of change and shedding that I truly thought when I came back from France that the worst was behind me. Like the hardest things I had to do this year were behind me, and now I could finally settle in, focus, and finally, get back to like business as usual, just like get back to like my life of not having these like really like hard things to deal with. And so when I got that letter, I was like, oh my God, of course this is happening during like the hardest year of my life. Of course this is happening like during the holidays. And I let myself spiral. And when I say that, I find that a lot of people think that when hard things happen to you, that you get to this point where you can just detach from your feelings. And yes, I did eventually get to the point where I could neutralize my feelings, then detach from the fear and the ego, and then make a very calm, collected decision. However, I think it's complete bullshit when people are like, well, just stop doing it. Just detach. That's literally like telling somebody who's a perfectionist, which, we are, oh, just stop being a perfectionist, or telling an addict, like, oh, just stop drinking. It doesn't work like that. So there's an actual like method to detaching that nobody talks about that I've had to learn this year, and now I teach all of my clients, which we'll go through in this episode. But what happened was when I got that letter, I immediately went through my steps of neutralizing my emotions. And that is awareness, acknowledgement, transformation, and integration. And that I teach all of my clients inside of the Balanced Entrepreneur membership. And so as I opened the letter, I could feel my blood boiling, right? I could literally feel like an anxiety attack coming on, because at that point I just was like, how much more of this I can take. And I know so many of you have been there as well, right? Where you're just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? Like all hope seems lost in like certain moments. But because of like what I've been through this year, I have gained the muscle, because it's truly is it's a muscle, it's a framework. There is like a method to the madness of like what to do in those situations. So I was very aware that I was spiraling, and I let myself spiral for about 4 hours, because part of the process of neutralizing your emotions is you actually have to feel them first. And a lot of people will tell you, like, oh, just like put them to the side, just like don't think about it, don't feel it, like pretend everything is okay. And that is toxic positivity. And like that's never anything I'm going to preach about. So, part of the awareness, which is step one, is part of the awareness and the acknowledgement is you actually have to feel it. So let yourself cry. I like let myself cry, I spiraled, and then I got to work on neutralizing. And I'm really proud of myself, because in the past I could have easily spiraled for days up to weeks, but I only spiraled for 4 hours. And then from there I was able to make a very rational, intuitive decision that was felt very calm and collected and really felt good in my soul. And when you're able to make decisions like that, you're able to cut down on resistance, and you're actually able to get things done a lot faster than if you just sit in that, because you don't physically know how to process your emotions and then move on to the next thing. So what happened was I let myself spiral, and then I was like, okay, part of the transformation and the tools that I teach and that I have found in myself is different for everybody. So people will be like, oh, just go journal, go meditate. I personally, those things don't work for me. I know people that works for them. That does not work for me. And that's completely okay, because part of this process is finding tools that work for you. So what works for me is not going to work for you. But what we do in the membership is we find the tools that work for you. So for me this year, nature and going on silent walks, I can't even tell you the clarity that that has given me. So when I instantly feel like a panic attack coming on, spiraling, anything that like truly sets me off, I know I immediately need to step away from the situation. And wherever I can physically get fresh air, so for me, it's Central Park, because I just live a couple blocks from it. For me this year, I've gone on like every single day, like religiously. I've gone into the park, because I feel like that is my place of grounding. And that is actually what calms me down, is finding your grounding space. So from there, I immediately went to on a walk to Central Park. I do not listen to music. I am a fan of silent walks, because that's actually when I can tap into my intuition, have a conversation with myself, because at the end of the day, your intuition is also co-creation. You are talking to your higher self, you are talking to your gut, and it's one, a muscle you have to develop, but two, it's a relationship you also have to develop. So I hear a lot of people, and I'm very guilty of this. I hear a lot of people being like, well, I trust my gut. And like, I make decisions off of my gut. But then the moment that your gut doesn't take you in a direction that gives you the outcome you want, all of a sudden you start doubting yourself. That is not mastering your compass. That is not mastering your relationship with your intuition. That is you thinking that you are following your intuition. And then when you're in a situation that you don't like, all of a sudden you don't listen to it, because you think that you can't trust yourself anymore. And I've seen this with so many of my clients, where they're like, well, that investment wasn't good, so clearly I'm not good with money. Clearly I can't make good decisions, right? It's like, no, that's actually not how your intuition works. Your intuition is going to guide you if you truly know how to listen to it. However, your intuition is also going to guide you into lessons you need to learn in order to be ready for the things you want, in order to create and be able to hold the capacity you want. So you're not always going to get what you want, but you're going to get what you need on the way to what you want. And that's what your intuition really helps you with. It also really helps you get there in the way of least resistance. Not to say you're not going to have resistance. Like this whole year for me was resistance. But now that I'm at the tail end of it, I fully see why I needed to go through everything I needed to go through this year. And now I finally see like the lessons grief has taught me and all the abundance Coco is sending me from the other side. And I definitely am so much more aware and conscious and intentional. And I've developed this beautiful relationship with the universe, my spirit guides, my intuition, where I physically know how to have a conversation with them and they talk back to me. Like I've mastered that. So now when I make decisions like what I did about France, came from such a place of calm and effortless and ease. And it was just such a beautiful, clear decision that came to me on that walk that that had no ego and no fear in it. And I think if this had happened to me at the beginning of the year or any other year, that I wouldn't have been ready for this life change because I just didn't have the lessons. I wasn't equipped with the tools and the lessons like I am now in order to be ready for a change. Because the old me would have been like, well, that's not logical. I have this beautiful apartment. It's literally my dream apartment. I've poured so much money into it. Like, it's the holidays, right? It's like, that's our ego. That's our ego. That's fear. That's like, quote unquote, logic that comes up. But when I went on that walk, the way I talk to my intuition, the way I talk to like my spirit guides is very much of like, okay, I've gotten to a place during my walk that I've calmed down. I've been able to at least like neutralize my emotions. Now, the way I detached from it was by actually having a conversation of, okay, so this is what's actually going on, right? Okay. I have to leave my apartment. What are my options from a very neutral point of view? And then what do I actually want? Like, what are logical options? But then what do I actually desire? And so, something that I've worked on developing this year is getting super, super clear on my values and priorities. And when I say that, I don't mean values and priorities like logistics. I mean me as a human being. What do I actually value and what do I actually want to prioritize? Now that I'm almost 32 in my life, that is going to transcend into my business without the noise of anybody else, without the noise of like family, friends, online business. No, what does my soul actually want? And the two things that have become very clear to me this year have been I truly desire peace and passion in everything. And that's something that really came out of my grief journey. So internal peace will always create external peace, but it starts on the inside. So because my year this year has been so chaotic, I've had to self-soothe by learning how to have internal peace. So I often talk about, especially in the membership, I talk about like creating your internal baseline, and that's basically having a regulated nervous system because you can't predict what your external reality is going to be a lot of the times on a day-to-day, like when these kinds of like things out of nowhere, like you have to leave your apartment all of a sudden happen, like you can't control that. Life is going to happen, business is going to happen. But when you know how to regulate your nervous system, when you know how to find that internal peace, that will always create external peace. So, and from that, that also creates passion. So when I think about everything in my life moving forward has to, one, give me internal peace, which therefore is going to give me external peace. And I need to feel passionate about it. I'm not willing just to do something to make money, to settle for it because, oh, well, this is easy because it makes me money. Well, this is the kind of content that does well. Well, I've been here for 13 years, so like might as well stay here. Like I truly want to feel passionate in all things of my life. So during the walk, I came back to those two values from a very neutralized point of view. Okay. And that's where I was able to detach. And so when I was having the conversation with myself of like, okay, how in this situation, how do I have peace and passion? And then as soon as I said that, my intuition, the voice inside of me my higher self very clearly said, it's time for you to go to France. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know about that. Right. But that was my ego. That was my ego. And instantly I was like, well, actually, no. Let me take a second. Let me, maybe. So I came back from my walk, and then another tool that really helps me is EFT tapping. So then I tapped on it. And I spent the next half of the day, because that happened in the morning, I spent the next half of the day like thinking it over. And the more I thought about it, the more my anxiety of like, where am I going to live and everything like that melted away, because the intuitive alignment of like, no, this actually could work. So I decided like, okay, if I am meant to go to France, I want a sign. I'm also like a big believer in signs. So I said, send me a sign. I'm not going to say what, because I also like don't like to put, I know a lot of people are like, oh, like you have to be very specific with signs. That's actually not how I find signs work, at least not for me. So I said, universe, if I'm meant to go to France, give me a sign. I know when I see a sign, I know when I see a sign, like I'll know it's the sign. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, when you just see something and you're like, oh wait, that's for me. That's how I felt. So I was maybe like 3 hours later, I was randomly, I was on Instagram, and all of a sudden I got a message from somebody, and somebody that I don't talk to that often. So the fact that she messaged me was, I mean, not that common. And the message I got was like, hey, do you have any recommendations for France? And while yes, I do go to France a lot, so it's not uncommon for somebody to message me that. But the fact that that happened 3 hours after the fact, I was like, okay, done. And so then I started thinking about like, okay, now that I've detached from all that other nonsense, I've detached from the emotions, I've neutralized it. Okay, now this seems like a very intuitively led decision. How can I actually make this happen? So when we talk about like going with the flow versus working in strategy, this is the like example I want to use here. Up until this point, like those 4 hours of spiraling and then asking for the sign, that was me in the flow. That was me actively looking for, how do I navigate this internally? Then when you make a decision, then it's go time with a strategy. So I know a lot of people, especially when you're super strategy focused and masculine, like I was up until this year, you're very much of like, it has to be 100% strategy led, because flow is like BS. And the way it is talked about in the online space is completely BS. And it truly is a balance. Everything is a balance. So there's a balance of like learning to develop and cultivate the muscle and the relationship with your intuition versus, okay, now now using strategy and logistics, how do I actually make this happen? So once I decided, like, okay, this is a possibility, I want to make this happen, how can I make this happen? Then I was like, okay, well, I have connections in France, because the last couple of years I've actually been solo traveling and I know people. And the people that my friend that I stayed with over the summertime, I was like, okay, I'm going to FaceTime her and see how she feels about it. And maybe I can stay with her. And then when I FaceTimed her the next day, she was like, oh my God, absolutely. This is a great idea. You've been talking about this forever. I think this is your sign that now is the time you need to do this. And I shit you not, ever since I made that decision, solely using my intuition from a place of true desire and alignment with my priorities and values, everything in the last 2 weeks, and as I'm recording this, it's 222, which I've been seeing that number like crazy recently. Everything has just flown into place. Like I literally like have rearranged my whole life in the last 2 weeks, and it's been the most effortless move I've ever had in my life. And it's also been the second biggest move I've had in my life, because moving to New York was the biggest move. And now moving to France is the second biggest move. And when I say it's been so effortless, like when I talked to her, she was like, yeah, come stay with me. But I'm not going to be here for like key one, but I think there's an apartment opened up in the village. I'm sure you can stay with that. Okay, so I reached out to the woman that I know who manages that building. She's like, of course you can have it. Boom, like housing locked in. Then I looked into health insurance. Boom, instantly got that. Then the day after Thanksgiving, listed everything on Facebook Marketplace because I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna do this, I want a true like clean slate. Within a week, everything was sold, which is now why I'm sitting on the floor. And then because of the water damage in the building, as you can see, like I've painted my walls, I put molding on my walls, I have wallpaper in my bedroom. And normally when you move out of an apartment, you have to like repaint and, get it back to like normal. And I was like, I don't want to paint this. This is a headache. I do not want to paint this. I do not want to take down the wallpaper. So then I was talking to my building manager and I was like, listen, I don't want to do this. You're forcing me to move out. I don't want to do this. And he was like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Like, we'll take care of all of that since like, we are just going to have to demo the whole place. And I was like, oh my God, perfect. So it's just wild that when you make decisions from such a place of intention and intuition and actually lead with your desires versus fear and ego, that like the universe truly rewards you. It truly does make things effortless, but you have to ask for it to be effortless. You not only do you have to ask for it, you actually have to develop the tools and the muscle for it to get to be easy, right? Because this situation very easily could have been a very hard situation to navigate, given that randomly one day I was told to like, you basically have to leave your home. So that's basically what had happened, and that's what's been happening for the last like 3 weeks. But that's how I went from spiraling to neutralizing my emotions to detaching from them, making a very informed decision, and then taking action on it. And that, like I said, is a very clear example of how to navigate the feminine and the masculine of like force and flow. You need both. You can't just be like in the woo woo side, but you can't just be in the masculine side, because you need to know how to utilize both in order to make not only effective decisions, but to make decisions you're going to like the outcomes of, right? I could have very easily, like I said, just gotten another apartment and then still felt like very stagnant and like, okay, I guess this is have to do because it just is like, seems like the easier option and seems like the more logical option, when actually, if I take a step back, the logical option is to go to France. And I have to say that I made this decision to like sell all of my things. And as much as I loved my things, like my apartment truly was mwah, chef's kiss. Like it was this apartment that I'm sitting in is my dream apartment in New York City. And all of my furniture, all of my things that I've thrifted, like collected, like they were all my dream things. It just like the life I've created here was my dream life. Like me at 17 sitting in my childhood bedroom in Florida, like couldn't even imagine the life I would go on to create in New York City. So when I look back at the last like 13 years, like I came here at 18 with like a dream and student loans, literally not knowing a single person, only being to like in New York City once, and that was like with my parents for like a week. But once again, even back then, my intuition was like, you have to go to New York. And I can confidently say that New York, the last like 13 years, has made me not only like the person I am today, because it's been my entire adulthood and I did it all by myself. It not only made me the person I am today, but it set me up so I could be ready for France. I don't think I could have ever been ready to make this transition, this next stage of this new era of my life into my 30s, if I didn't have New York. And so somebody the other day asked me like, well, aren't you nervous? Because, a normal person is very like, well, what about the logistics and this and that? And I honestly said no. Honestly, like the biggest thing I'm nervous about is that I'm going to have to drive and pump gas, because I haven't done that since I was like 17, because I live in New York City. And so like, I don't drive. So when was the last time I had to pump gas? Which seems like such like obscure thing to be nervous about, but that's city living. And yeah, no, I just feel really excited. I feel very equipped. I feel excited, and I mean, listen, if I could move here at the age of 18 with like $0, not knowing anybody, and not only like surviving, but thriving in the hardest city on earth. I mean, it's very true what they say. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And now I'm going to a place where, yes, I don't speak the language, but I will. I will because I'm going to force myself. Um, I'm going there at the age of 32 to a place I've been to multiple times, and I know people there. I mean, that seems like very easy to me. And not to say that there won't be challenges because it's life and there's always going to be challenges in life, but it just seems like a very logical, exciting next step. And if I'm being honest, with everything I've gone through this year, New York has always been the place, at least it was the last 13 years, where I felt very much grounded. I felt like it was emotionally safe to be me here. I felt very seen here, very heard here, which is something I craved my entire childhood. And then when I graduated high school and I moved here, I finally felt like I was home. And even though I didn't grow up here, I truly created a home and a life for myself here that I'm extremely proud of. And the only other place I've ever felt that was France. And so, with everything that went on this year through my deep healing and grieving process, I kind of started to lose that feeling and the entire year of searching for it. And so, when I went to France for those 2 months, I felt that feeling there before on all my other trips, but specifically when I was there for 2 months, I really felt it. And I remember like when I had to go back, I was like, oh God, I don't want to. Like I do and I don't. And now when I think about it, I was like, oh, well, I feel like the feeling just kind of faded for me because I did everything I was meant to do here. And not to say I won't be back. I mean, in my ideal reality, I would have a home here and there. And I mean, like one day when I'm financially able to afford both, I will. But I just feel like how amazing it is that I've been able to almost like outgrow a place as large as New York City. And I truly feel that all the lessons I needed to learn, all of my goals, everything I wanted to accomplish, needed to accomplish, had the opportunity to accomplish, I've done. And so it truly feels just like the ending of one chapter. So my next era in France, that's where my next growth opportunity, my next not only growth opportunity for me as a person but for my business and just like the next part of my life is there, and that feels like really exciting to me. But once again, I don't think I would have this mindset at the beginning of the year or any other year because I don't think I would have been able to approach it from such a neutralized, detached point of view of I'm going to follow what I actually want to do versus follow what I've been doing and what feels safe. Another topic I want to bring up is there is a difference between escaping and having clarity of when you're ready to make a really big life change. So before before I was in France for 2 months at the during the summer, um, I was originally supposed to be there for 2 weeks, and then my friend asked me because she knew I was having a hard time, asked me if I wanted to stay with her for the summer. And I remember having while I was in France, I had a session with my therapist, and I asked her, I'm like, do you feel like I'm running away? Obviously, like, I'm having a really hard time just like anywhere because I'm in my body and I'm having a really hard time in life right now. But do you think me staying in France for 2 months is escaping, or do you think this is actually good for me? And she said, you're not escaping. You need a shock to your system. And this is the shock to the system you need. And so 1,000% that those 2 months gave me the clarity I needed because I needed to be physically removed from an environment to have clarity. So that's another part of like the awareness and acknowledgement state is asking yourself like, if I'm getting ready to make a life change or if I want to make a really big change, is it because I'm escaping or I need to put myself in a situation where I'm shocking my system to find clarity? And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I just want to like move to a different country, or I want to, burn everything down to the ground, open a coffee shop, work on a farm, and like, oh, that just seems like such a like a simpler life, right? Like we all have those ideas, and not to say that you can't do those things and be like really successful and run a business and all those things, but I think that brings up the topic of like the reason why a lot of people feel burned out or want to do those things in the first place is because you think your burnout or all these like heavy emotions you're feeling right now can be solved with escaping, can be solved with a vacation. And they can't, because at the end of the day, you can move locations or you can do whatever, you can create new offers, you can change everything, but at the end of the day, if you don't actually start by healing you, feeling like actually fixing the root cause of the problem, and the root cause of the problem is your inner healing. If you don't actually take a good hard look under the hood of that, that everything in your external reality is going to remain the same no matter where you are, no matter what you're selling, no matter your business model, it's never going to change. So when I look at this year and everything I've been through, that has given me the ability and the tools to have the muscle and the experience to be like, oh, I'm ready for a life change and I'm doing it very purposefully and intentionally, and I'm not escaping. I just believe I am fully ready for this next step. And that is a really big thing I want to just differentiate between escaping and having the clarity to make a very informed decision, even if it is a really big one. Okay, now down to the logistics, because I know all of you are nosy Nellies. So, logistics like where, how, blah, 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 blah. Number one, am I taking Norman? Of course I'm taking Norman. He's my child. Why would I not take him? So, I just got Norman like 4 weeks ago, and obviously I'm taking him. He's my baby, and I love him so much. Can't imagine my life without him now. Yeah, so with Norman, it's pretty simple. All he needs is an international health certificate. So if you ever want to travel with your animal overseas, all you have to do is you obviously have to pay for them on the airline. I'm flying Air France, but then also in order to leave the United States and then go to a foreign country, specifically Europe, you need an international health certificate. And all that means is like you have to find a vet who's USDA certified. In New York, they're all certified. You have to make an appointment. They basically have to fill out a bunch of papers, and then they need to send that to the USDA. The USDA then sends you a certificate, and you present that at border control. That's basically it. So it's just expensive, like anything else. But yeah, it's pretty simple. Where am I going to be living? So going to be living in an apartment for 2 months, and then I'm going to be staying with my friend. So it's in the south of France. It's in the mountains. So it's in the mid-Pyrenees. It's about an hour from the Spain border. It's where I've spent the last 2 summers. It's a very tiny village. There's like 40 people there. Yes, I will be the youngest. So it's definitely going to be like a culture shock, but I personally love it. Every time I go there, even though the 2 months I was there, I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I'm just really excited. I've never lived in the mountains. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. And then after that, we'll kind of just see. So one of the things also about this move is I'm going into it with like zero expectations or pressure. And by that I mean I'm just I'm not planning things out. Like, obviously, there's certain things I definitely want to do, and there's certain like logistics you need to plan out, obviously. But I've just gotten to the point in like my surrendering journey where I don't give a shit. It's frankly not. It's frankly none of my business to know what I'll be doing like next October or over the summer. Like the universe can like take care of that, and like things will present itself to me when they want to. But like I don't need to know. I don't need to know, and frankly, I don't care. I'm very much going into this as I'm taking it like month by month also, because I'm not I'm not signing a lease. I'm like living in an apartment Airbnb for 2 months, and then I'm gonna be like living with my friend. I mean, the goal is by the end of next year, I would have my own place. But once again, I'm not putting pressures or expectation of this. I'm truly using next year as I'm attached to nothing and no one except Norman and my 2 boxes of clothes and shoes. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited that actually I have nothing that I'm attached to. So going into it with just kind of like, I'm really excited to see what unfolds. I'm really excited for the potential of what could be created here. And realistically, I can always come back. New York is always going to be here. My family and friends are always going to be here. I don't have this looming sense that I used to of like, I have to make certain things work or else I feel doom and gloom because I failed. I'm truly going into this with like, okay, intuition, okay, universe, I'm going to take it month by month. I'm going to take all the opportunities presented in front of me. Very, eat, pray, love. And I'm just going to use next year as like an eat, pray, love year and see what happens. And if I come back, I come back. If I stay, I stay. But I just really, yeah, it's frankly, I'm at the point where like it's none of my business to know how like things of how things are going to happen for the most part. I've truly like gave it up to the universe and surrendered, and it is what it is. And that's something I definitely would have not been able to say at the beginning of this year, which I'm really proud of myself. So how? I think that's like the biggest question is like, how am I able to live there? So in case you don't know, I'm actually a dual citizen, which also made this move really easy. So I was born in Poland, which is part of the United Union, the European Union, which France is a part of as well. So, and I'm also an American citizen. So I hold 2 citizenships, 2 passports. So I have a legal right to live, work, in the US, as well as live and work anywhere in the EU. So it literally was as simple as just buying a one-way ticket, which once again made the move so easy. So that's also why there's no like pressure and expectations because I have free range of where I can live and work and travel to, not only for my business but legally. That's why I was like, if I'm not committing to a lease or I'm buying anything in France, like, if I decide I want to come home after 3 months, I'll come home. If I would decide I want to come home after 6 months, I'll come home. Like, but what if I don't? What if I just stay there? So that's really easy and exciting and it really takes the pressures off. Do I know the language? No, I don't. I don't, but it is my goal by the end of next year, and anybody can like quote me on this. So when the end of next year happens, is by the end of next year, I would love to be trilingual. So fluent in English, Polish, and French. So French is the only language I'm not fluent in that I really want to. And I'm really hoping that by being there and living there, I'm going to force myself to be fluent or at least be able to have like a conversation with somebody and not need to like rely on Google Translator. Um, so we shall see about that. Also, the village that I'll be living in, nobody speaks English aside from like my friend. So, yes. So I'm really hoping that forces me. Healthcare. So, because I technically am a EU citizen, I do qualify for universal health coverage. However, because I don't pay Social Security there, that like doesn't qualify me, which fair. So instead, I found once again it was super easy. I just found like expat insurance through Cigna, which is an American brand, by the way, and it's super cheap and it literally covers everything. Like I think I'm going to be paying like $108 a month, which for the reference, in New York I was paying over $300 and it literally covered nothing. Literally covered nothing, and my deductible was through the roof. But because it's Europe, it's cheap and literally covers everything. So I'm very excited for that. So once again, also the hope is by sometime next year, I can look into what that would actually logistically look like of how do I start paying taxes over there as well. So that way I can utilize all of my legal benefits, health benefits and all of that. So that's exciting. And then the one that I'm most anxious about is a car. Like I said, I live in New York, so I haven't owned one since I was a senior in high school. Um, so I feel like if that's my biggest problem, I'm probably doing good. But I'm renting a car. I'm renting a car very nervous about the driving process just because I don't drive in general. I know how to drive. I have a driver's license. I just don't drive. And then pumping gas. So I was actually texting my friend who lives in France, who's gonna come see me the first couple of days I'm there. She lives about like 3 hours away from where I'll be living. But I was like, Jen, you have to teach me how to pump gas. I literally haven't pumped gas since I was like 18 years old. She was like, okay, well, we'll set you up with knowing how to like, control a car once you're there. So those are logistics. I think I've covered everything. Very excited. Like I said, I leave at like 4:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve. So I will be sharing the journey on Instagram, but then I'll also be starting a brand new TikTok channel. So follow me on there for my journey. And that's solely just going to be my like adventures as like an expat settling and living there. And yeah, I'm just really excited. I'm super open to receiving anything that happens. I'm just here for a good time to see what the possibilities are. And that just really feels like a breath of fresh air of not needing to control every single little thing, because after this year I just have like I'm too tired to be controlling, to be quite honest. So if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. But yeah, thank you listening to my journey, and I hope to talk to you soon.